like consultants do, okay? The only difference is we don't have company representatives here. So you will be looking at companies from an angle of consultants. Let's say you're a group of consultants, and you will be analyzing all of the forces and value chain activities, and you will have company analytic reports to be uploaded, and they are all on the syllabus. So you will be starting the teamwork. And I'm assuming also with the globus now, you should be almost done with the quiz takes and be ready to play the game because your practice round decision is due soon. Uh, so here, yeah, on the 16th, which is 5 days from now on Tuesday, you need to submit your practice round decision number one. Now, those are practice decisions, and yes, they won't be counting towards your overall ranking in the game, but they are good practices for you to play the game effectively, efficiently. Okay. Any questions before I will be covering external environment with you today. So please let me know if you have any questions, and I will try to create a team breakout if I can. Maybe you will quickly tell me the members, and then I will quickly form the teams. That way we can work it out because I didn't figure out yet how to pre-form the teams on the Zoom. There's a way to do that, I guess. But anyway, we'll do it. And then I'll have your teams meet, maybe the first time on a Zoom, or maybe the second time, or whoever met up until now. That's great. That's wonderful to hear if you already met. If you haven't done so, this is a chance. So today we'll do that. And then please let me know if you have any other questions. Okay? Anything you want to ask me for housekeeping, for class schedule, for anything, for teams?
Are we doing the breakout room today?
Yes, I'm planning to do a breakout room with the teams. But mostly towards the end.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, anybody else have any question? So for those of you who read the second chapter on external environment, for those of you who haven't, please do. And for those of you who read, I will be asking some questions as I always do, and we will have a group discussion about certain topics and concepts of external environment, maybe give examples from some companies. And please feel free to raise your hand when you want to participate. I will see it. And also you can write it in the chat. Usually when I do the lecture part, I don't get back to the chats immediately, but I try to get back to the chats as soon as I'm done with one part of the slide. Okay, so make sure you use those if you don't want to, speak up today. If you don't feel like it, it's okay. But you can use the chat feature. Okay, perfect. Now let's go into what does the external environment mean, and we will mostly talk about, guys, the importance of the external environment, really. And with the importance, what we mean by is the leaders, the managers of the company need to do a scanning. They need to look at the environment in terms of the forces that we will outline shortly, and they will need to do some monitoring, and they will also need to consider some competitive intelligence development. I will explain what those are, but the reason of all this is to be able to make some forecasts. What do you mean by forecasts? Why are they important?
Um, they're like to predict any changes, like the textbook talks about like environmental changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can it be like to be proactive instead of reactive?
Yes. Yes, that's the purpose mostly. And for some departments, it's even really vital. You need to do forecasting, definitely. Anybody else? So for your financials, for your financial planning, let's say for your sales figures, yes, Jarna. Jana, yes.
I also think they do forecasting in order to sort of minimize threats and sort of maybe be like on top of your game. I remember even in chapter 1, they were discussing that if you aren't paying attention to possible going concerns and your company's future, that when you get to the point where you're having to look at that, it's too late because like you should have been already looking for those and addressing those.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you for that. Yes, I mean, remember the ambidextrous organizations we mentioned, the long term and the short term, you need to be able to have, you need to be both sighted, like not nearsighted, but also far sighted. So it means you should be able to see what's tomorrow and what's in the future in 10 days from now, 1 year from now. And you need to be able to look at your numbers very closely, sales figures, your revenue growth, okay, your market share, okay, your inventories. So whenever you have an inventory, like you're selling some goods, you need to think about the ways in which you are going to be able to, sell the inventory so that you don't actually come up with extra, uh, uh, problems with what you are storing. So you don't have extra storage issues of your products, or your products may become stale. Let's say you're in the produce business. The forecasting is even more important because those are really perishable items, like perishable foods. So you need to be able to kind of plan ahead to be able to foresee not only the consuming practices of the people, but also related to the numbers. How much will I be able to sell in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and how should I be getting ready for that in terms of my inventory? Okay, so that I don't become, like let's say, overwhelmed with all the additional unnecessary redundant storage that I need to pay for, or items that will be kind of stale. So that those are all important things to consider when you do forecasting. Again, like financials, like your sales, your profits, your costs. How am I going to, like, is my rent going to increase next year? Or let's say, is my software, agreement, am I going to be paying differently? So what is my plan? Okay, these are all needing to be forecasting calculations, and that's why external environment is so critical, because as you could see, some commodity prices, depending on the industry you're at, for example, you're in the oil industry, and let's say the commodity price has changed, has gone down, or has gone up, that has huge, risk for oil and gas industry, as an example. So depending on the industries, the commodities, the prices of the goods that you buy and sell, your rent price, your stock, your storages, your inventory, the money that you pay for those. So any angle of the value chain, like financial, production based, marketing based. For example, influencers. Let's say you want to use influencers for your marketing, and let's say the group of influencers that you are going to be dealing with, they start to charge more for some reason. Are you going to be able to foresee that raise in price if you need to do a major launch of your product, let's say? These are all related to future planning, and forecasting is one of the major activity of any company that has to really, plan ahead and not, be grappling with unexpected costs that might appear sometime in the near or far future. Somebody else had raised the hand. Claudia, was it you?
Yeah, I was gonna say forecasting could be influenced by consumer behavior and trends. So that's something that they need to consider in the future as possible opportunities or obstacles.
Exactly. Let's say you are investing in a brick and mortar store, and you invested in a huge deal. And then what happens, like with the COVID and beyond, you start to see that people really don't prefer buy from brick and mortar anymore. And instead, maybe investing a little bit on the e-commerce portion of your business might be making more sense rather than try to plan open all these brick and mortar in every city that you're targeting. So these are all things that are under forecasting. And of course, they need to be in tune with your strategies. Okay. Every time you do forecasting, every time you do a future for like future planning, future proactivity, you need to be able to consider your strategies. And those strategies we will study more. They have to rely on your knowledge of the external and internal environment. Okay. Okay, now let's move a little bit. Um, what do you mean by competitive intelligence? Well, competitive intelligence, which you will also be doing in your Globus exercise, if you do it really well, because you will be shared some competitive intelligence reports from time to time. You will see it as a team, and you will have access to that. And competitive intelligence mainly helps you to understand your industry. It helps you identify the strengths and weaknesses of your rivals, your competitors. You're able to see some data on the competitors, and you're able to, it's up to you how to interpret that data. Okay. Of course, it won't be giving you in the Globus, let's say, like every piece of strategic move that your competitor makes, but it's going to give you some of the results, outcomes of the decisions that they made and where they are right now. So you will be dealing with some numbers, you will be seeing some of the activities that they do, but not necessarily the strategy underlying that. So, but still, I mean, these competitive intelligence reports and benefiting from the competitor data is very important. This helps firms kind of avoid surprises that help you anticipate another person's moves. And also it decreases your response time, which means your ability to respond to a changing competitive landscape, okay, as soon as possible. Because the more delayed it becomes, the more the slower you go in terms of your actions, the more you lag behind. Okay, and you don't want to be lagging behind of others. So again, some companies, unfortunately, kind of uh, uh, go into some unethical behaviors. They kind of do that, steal some information from others in unethical ways. They put some insiders into some companies which are allies, and they help them gain more information for that company. So these are unethical and they shouldn't be done. So mostly what we do in competitive intelligence is mainly we are analyzing competitors based on the information available to the market. And we already know the IPO companies already have, these outlined information every quarter to the public because they are public companies. They have to give their numbers, they have to give their cost structures, and any possible moves that they want to make. So they give some information already. They give out some information, and so we need to stick with that information rather than try to find some unethical ways of obtaining some more information to compete and this way in unethical ways. So we don't want to do that, right? And competitive intelligence again is very important to you. And in the Globus, you will experiment with the reports that's being given to you, and you will find out information that might be of use to you when you try to do your next move in the next round, let's say. Okay, so this is an important part of the scanning and planning. When we talk about forecasting, we are trying to predict change. So what kind of changes are we predicting? Environmental changes, scope of that change, speed of that change, intensity of that change. Obviously, people who are like in WebEx or let's say Microsoft Teams, when COVID was, at an outbreak back in March last year, maybe they weren't able to forecast enough to make their sales, to make their programs, to make their tools readily available for the consumers. And then Zoom came in. Zoom was already there for free, and Zoom had made its way through even free for a lot of schools. Okay, so this was like an immense kind of user experience on Zoom, and as well as people experiencing Zoom. And that's why Zoom is more preferred today, because it's readily available. It used to be free. People like it. And it's even free for some schooling systems. So, prediction of that change is very important. I'm not saying they should have predicted COVID outbreak, but, even when the outbreak happened, they could have made maybe some moves which would they wouldn't maybe eliminate Zoom's, success, but still they would do certain things maybe to get more share from the market. And we have something we call scenario analysis. It's about detailed assessment of the ways in which you are trying some scenarios and seeing what might be possible moves according to what kind of. It's like having a B plan, C plan, so to say. Let's say COVID goes on next year and then the year following. Are you having a plan based on COVID, continuum, or are you having a plan only for next year? So these are all important part of the scenario analysis, and you are making alternative planning based on alternative scenarios that you kind of generate. Let me look at the chat real quick. Okay, so environmental change means all of those things, Jahid. It means competitors. So we will look at environmental analysis very shortly. External analysis means, everything, like competitors, economic shifts, geographic shifts. For example, with the COVID situation, we already had economic shifts, right? We had people moving away from New York City. So that was a geographic shift as well. And then we also had, competitors making different moves based on people's locations, based on different, buying habits of users. Like a lot of people for a while were relying on essential businesses, correct? Like a lot of stores were closed. Like TJ Maxx was closed for a while, for example, where I live is very close, and it was closed. In the meantime, was TJ Maxx profiting from its online presence? Maybe yes, maybe not so much. But again, these are all environmental changes that lead some organizations to make plan B, plan A, plan C, whatever. And those incorporate all of the factors that I told you just now. Okay, is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the SWOT analysis. What do we mean by SWOT? Anybody wants to just take a quick shot? And I'm sure you heard about SWOT before. I'm sure maybe you've tried out doing SWOT for some companies, and you will be required to do SWOT analysis for your companies as well. Jarna?
I can't remember the T, but I know that S is strength, the W is weakness, the O is opportunities, but I don't know, I'm blanking on T.
It's okay. It's okay. Thanks for that try.
Threats.
That's all.
Thanks.
Yes, threats. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and it's like a internal, like deeper look into the industry as of right now and where it look to get better over time.
Yes. So what we mean by SWOT is mainly companies' strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So strengths and weaknesses are mostly internal stuff, guys. Okay, where you excel and where you might not excel so much. And then the environmental part is your opportunities and threats. So what is a COVID situation for companies? For some companies, it's a threat. For some companies, it's an opportunity. Go ahead, Andrew. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Or emergence of a new innovation. I already told this in my other class for those of you there. I mean, it's a second time, but 3D printing becoming more available. Is it a threat or an opportunity?
It's both a threat and opportunity. It's a threat for their competitors, and opportunity for people that are in the same industry to like grow and maybe compete more fairly, I'd say.
Perfect, Diana. Andrew? With 3D printing, what industry is at stake, guys? What industry is at stake?
Maybe like construction, or I don't know.
Yes, construction might be, if there is like, if you're able to build a house by 3D printing, definitely. Some of the construction businesses might become obsolete. What else? Which else?
Like you can use it for a lot of things actually. You can like create tools, and you can also create like items, you know, for everyday use. You can use it for art. So there are a lot of like industries you can utilize it in. So I'm not quite sure which
Yes.
is it that it specifically like specifies in, you know.
Okay, perfect. And Diana, let's raise the hand before we speak. For everybody, actually, this is important. Okay, Carlo and Andrew, please.
Maybe like technology, like companies that produce the printers, like HP, for example, or a company that manufactures the actual technology itself. So that could be the
Is it a
sector.
threat? Is it a threat or opportunity for them?
It could be an opportunity because they could use it like for manufacturing new products.
Perfect. Okay, okay. For those, it could be an Andrew. Aha, that's interesting. That's interesting. So with, if I have a 3D printing at home and I will be able to print my lamp, let's say, or I will be able to print my chair, what industry is that? Kevin?
Isn't that the manufacturing industry?
Exactly, as a whole. As a whole, manufacturing industry is being disrupted by the 3D printing. The same happened with camera and digital cameras overall, with the launch of smartphones increasingly, especially iPhone, because it kind of shoots wonderful pictures already, so you don't need an extra camera, although some people still buy it. But the thing is, it became a good substitute. So we don't really buy, I don't know if you do, but I don't own a digital camera anymore. So my smartphone does that. So anytime a technology is kind of bringing an innovation that kind of creates a threat to an already existing industry in terms of being a substitute, or in terms of being like any other disruptive innovation, it is a threat. It's not only a threat, so let me make the correction there, because some of you said it's a threat for the competitors. It's not only a threat for the competitors, it's also a threat for existing businesses that might become obsolete because of the invention of the new technology. Like, what did Zoom do? Let's forget about the COVID for a while. What does Zoom do? What does it kind of substitute? What does it kind of, make something obsolete? And Kevin?
Traveling, because you can just host a meeting. Also, just getting on the train to the city. Like, I don't need to do that anymore if I can just do it at home.
Yeah. I mean, even with the online learning schools, right? Our campuses. I know a lot of you might be wanting to coming back to school in person, which is wonderful. But at the same time, having this luxury of going into class anytime you'd like, listening to a recording if you can, it gives you a lot of flexibility to your life. Some of the students take async courses, for example. It's not the same as in-person or sync course, but still, people who are busy working at apart from school, have full-time jobs, and their job doesn't allow them to take the education they need, they can benefit from the online learning, and they could still graduate. So these are the things that I wanted to think about in terms of threats, opportunities. Some of the things are very much opportunities, and some of the things are threats, depending on what industry, what market you're talking about. Jocelyn?
Yeah, I was also gonna say that it disrupts kind of like the housing industry or maybe like landlords too, because a lot of people are moving away from like more expensive cities. Like for example, a lot of people like left New York, right, and they moved to like the countryside where it's cheaper area of living, and you're getting more for your bang for your buck, basically. So it's kind of affecting that industry too.
Real estate industry is being threatened, and also, like the fact that the big city idea of big city, it's not necessarily an industry per se, but idea of a big city is being disrupted. Because why do we have big cities? The big cities are big cities like London, New York, Paris, Singapore, Hong Kong. We have these big cities because there's a lot of job opportunities. There's a lot of industries there. There's a lot of businesses there. It's a location-based thing. But because of the new advancements in technology and the way COVID created this work from home lifestyle, the location as it was, it's not as critical anymore. Some companies still say this. Some companies say, hey, we would like you to, live in the country at least. So don't go away from a country if you want to work for us. Let's say I'm Twitter, and I actually announced that all my employees will work from home permanently, but I might still say, hey, I want you to be in the country because I want you to be in similar time zones. This is normal. This is understandable. But then San Francisco as a city, which is quite high in terms of its housing offers, it's huge. Like the prices in around this area, I lived for a while. It's too expensive. But now people say, why don't I live in Seattle? Or why don't I go to Austin, Texas? Or why don't I just go to Utah, which is close, and the rent is like about 1/3 of what I pay in San Francisco, and I can do my job still. So why do I have to live in that expensive place? The same thing is like, you can think about the similar idea in industries where a new technology, a new innovation, a newcomer can actually disrupt what's available. And the risk is you might become obsolete. So these are the things I want you to think about as we approach, what do we mean by SWOT, why it is important, and you will need to do this for your companies of choice. Okay. Okay, now next, let's go into the general environment and the importance of the general environment. I'll get to you, Jana. Just let me go ahead a little bit. The general environment is demographic, sociocultural, political, technological, economic, global. And with demographics, we know it's pretty much straightforward, right? Aging population, rising affluence, or increase of unemployment, like in United States right now. Wiping out student loans is being discussed, right? These are all part of your landscape of demographics. Changes in ethnic compositions, geographic distribution of the population, income level disparities. People having more disposable income versus people not having that, or people having too much debt to pay, things like that. These are all part of your demographic segment analysis, and they say a lot in terms of your products or services, pricing them, the competitors, and how you're going to treat them. What moves are you going to make based on these demographics? Okay. The sociocultural segment, usually like values, belief, lifestyles, more women now in the workforce. So increase in temporary workers today, for example, part-time, freelance people, more. Greater concern for healthy food options, healthy lifestyle, a greater concern in your generation, especially we see this evident, greater concern for the environment. Postponement of marriage. There is a trend now that I've seen lately. I don't know if you also see it around you, but less and less people are wanting to get married as soon as possible, and even having children. There is a trend now. The research shows some statistics that females today, like younger generation, like 20s, 30s, they may not go into having children right away. Some of them just give up the idea of having children because they know what it takes usually to have a child and do what you want to do in life and things like that. And given this economic, uh, ambivalent environment in terms of all the incomes and the economic developments and underdevelopments. So these are all under your sociocultural segment. When you consider your external environment, you need to consider all of these things. If you have a product to launch, if you have a new, idea of a business, these are all important things to consider. And then political legal segment, like, even in America, we have NAFTA agreement, like Canada, Mexico, and United States, they have a free trade agreement between them, and they don't have additional taxes when they do business with one another. And then you have other things like tort reforms and increasing minimum wages, taxations. So all of these things, healthcare acts, they also relate to the industry. Depending on the industry that you are in, these could be important forces impacting your businesses, and you need to consider these as well. Technology, we talked enough of that, but still you can see all of these developments in the technology segment, and you see why it might be important in the future and today, so that you kind of plan accordingly. Whatever you're planning, depending on the technological development, if it becomes obsolete or useless in 2 years, then you should be changing the idea, right? So you need to consider these nanotechnology, big data, and all these, global warming, pollution, and now COVID situation. They all relate to your technology and things that happen in relation to this segment. So you need to consider these as well. Economy, so interest rates, unemployment, GPDs, CPIs. So these are like changes in stock market valuations. They all also impact industries. Like lately, I discussed in another class, Robin Hood was impacted heavily by what happened with GameStop. And some people left using this app for buying stock and exchanging stock, and some people actually added them to their list of apps. But still, that was an economic change around them, and they weren't expecting this to happen by little investors making some moves and impacting overall landscape of the free trade. And yes, things happen, although they might be going in a really nice trend. Things might change anytime because of the increased communication and technology and different behaviors of people, which are not sometimes predictable. So not all the time we are seeing predictable moves by people. People could do amazingly different things, and it's not easy to predict all of these at once. Global, so similarly, like some agreements, the World Trade Organization agreements, increasing the global trade. Even with the COVID, like why did it become so widespread? Why did it spread so quickly? Because compared to 20, 30 years ago, now we have more people traveling, more people going to different countries, more people coming from some place to another. Even with the COVID, like people still travel. So it's the increased globalization, world traveling, also, increase the speed of this virus spread. So we have to understand that the global forces are all very important, and emergence of some countries like India and China as major economies not only because of their huge populations, but also the way they produce values and products for the world, for world countries, and the way they create knowledge, create businesses around their labor force and everything. Again, terrorism, this is still a risk, especially in certain parts of the world, Asia, Middle East. We see those in different ways in different countries, and these are all kind of forces you need to take into consideration. Let's say you want to go to another part of the world to do your business. You need to consider these forces in a certain environment that you are planning to operate and do business in. Okay, any questions? Perfect. So when you look at these guys, 5 forces model, you talk about mainly 5, and again here you have people who might be entering your industry, not yet, but they might have a probability of entry, potential entrants, not competitors yet, but entrants. Okay, Here you might see some substitute products going in, some competitors coming in, but those are potentials yet. And then you have existing competitors, people who are already inside the industry and already in play, right? And then you have buyers, people who could be B2C or B2B. When you think about B2B, these are like big distributors, wholesalers who are buyers, big buyers. And then you have individual consumers, individual customers who are also buyers. Okay, those are all in the similar category. And then substitutes, we have, as I said, certain, devices, products, which are already in place in the industry that are kind of creating a problem for you because they are replacing your products somehow or services. And then we have suppliers. Those are, especially, for example, in the early days of Tesla, they had a hard time with the batteries because the batteries that the suppliers were doing, producing, were quite expensive. So the most expensive actually item in the cost structure of Tesla was, one of them was batteries. So what happened is that over time they decided to produce themselves because suppliers producing them was forming a threat to the company's profit margins. So what's happening here is that the five forces could be in any form and any shape. And here, the most invisible ones here are potential entrants to the industry. Those who are not in the industry yet, but they might be potentially, coming in. And that's where we talk about things like entry barriers, like or easy to enter industries, like industries which are easy to enter. What are they? Do you have any ideas about what might be some easy to enter industries, Andrew? Uh-huh. E-commerce, but raw materials, Andrew, you might need an upfront investment probably with the capital requirements. It still may not be so easy. But how about like tutoring industry? Let's say you want to be a tutor. It's a big industry. I studied it very recently, and it's like a billions and billions of dollars worth. And today there's an increased need for tutors, online tutors especially. Is it easy or hard to enter that industry as an individual tutor? As an example. Yes, Andrew? Of course. Of course. Yeah. But I mean, nobody can tell you, you can't, I mean, you need like this and this and this before you go into this. I mean, you can just start doing it. If you have the capabilities and you meet some people and they refer you to some people, it's not like, as an example, going into automation, automotive industries, or going into high tech industries where you need to really have a good amount of innovation already invested in. So that's what I mean. Some industries are rather easier to enter, and some are really hard. For example, what did you think about before the pandemic? If you lived in New York City, or if you're familiar with New York City restaurants, was it easy to enter? Was it hard to enter to be a New York City restaurant? What is your view on that? Was it easy to enter industry before the pandemic? Kevin?
I thought it was pretty difficult to begin with because you need to find space that's expensive. You need to get a bunch of permits. And yeah, the government, New York City, never mind. They just have a lot of requirements and permits and regulations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And at the same time, there is an instant review. By the time customers come to your restaurant and spend time with your restaurant and eat in your restaurant, they would immediately let other people know. Because people in New York usually used to eat a lot outside. So they are very used to, eating outside. So they are educated customers in the fact that they know what they expect for what price. I know this because there was a restaurant that was opened, a steak restaurant. The owner was from Turkey, actually. And he was immediately faced backlash from the customers because they said, oh my God, this is a huge price for a moderate steak, because people in New York knew what kind of steak would cost how much money, because they are so, used to going to a restaurant, having a steak or having a pizza, and they had a good idea about what it should cost and what it shouldn't cost. Okay, so that's what I mean. In any kind of geography, although in New York it might have been harder, maybe in Louisville, Kentucky. Okay, I'm just making this up. I visited there years ago, but in Louisville, it might be rather easy. But in that case, your revenue growth may not be as much, high as you expect because of the potential demand. So again, you're talking about, potential entrance to the industry, which may or may not, come in because of the entry barriers being too high or low or somewhere in the middle. And your job, when you analyze your companies, you need to analyze their industry based on these forces. Okay. And this is what we will do also in our case analysis and the following. Again, the threat of new entrants, as some of you mentioned, depends on certain things. Economies of scale. Some of the companies who are already in business, like for example, McDonald's, they already have created a lot of economies of scale, which means they have produced enough, they have practiced enough, they know this so well that they can produce even cheaper and cheaper for each hamburger that they produce. So that makes it harder for you to become a chain, for example, because there are other companies already at place who do it least costly as possible. And then product differentiation. In a certain industry, there might be a very high differentiation of the product. Maybe let's say smartphones. Let's say you want to produce smartphones in this industry, because there is like a lot of differentiation in the market by Samsung, by Apple, by Google Pixel, and some others. It would not be easy for you to, even though you would imitate some of the features, it wouldn't be like that kind of easy for you to go into that market. Capital requirements, we mentioned that. Switching costs. What is switching costs? Anybody remember what that was? I mentioned it, I think, briefly before. What is a switching cost? Diana?
It's the fact that you would have to probably switch to many different products. Like if you're owner of everything Apple, it will be inconvenient for you to like transfer everything to like a Samsung device or like Microsoft computers, so just the
Okay,
convenience.
let's say you are a new entrant and people already have a high switching cost shifting to your product line. And then your job is harder because they already have, and switching cost is not only with the money, but the effort and time required for me to switch to your product, right? Some of you are already Apple users and you know that your iPhone, your laptop, and your Apple TV and your, iPod, whatever you use, iPad, they are all connected. So that creates a higher switching cost for you once you try to change, let's say, smartphone only, because then you have to change everything, right? So that's what we mean by switching costs. And a lot of individuals, they don't want to switch mainly because they don't want to take the hassle of, learning and learning and learning and learning new product, okay? Access to distribution channels. Well, I want to compete with Walmart. Well, welcome to the jungle. I mean, good luck. Walmart, right? Walmart, Costco, Aldi, Trader Joe's, Target, Kmart. So we have all these options, and these companies, although they make, I don't know, different amounts of profits, they have access to their channels of distribution quite easily compared to you. So you may not have the same access once you start to play the game. Okay, so access. And cost disadvantages, independent of your scale economy, you might have cost disadvantages based on the geography, based on the raw material that you need to buy, based on the technology investment you need to make. So again, these are all the threats for the new entrants. And if a industry has high barrier, that means it's not easy. If there's a low barrier, like in the tutoring industry, then it's a lot easier to enter. Okay. Okay. So what's next? The bargaining power of buyers. What do we mean by bargaining power of buyers? What is it that we mean by bargaining power of buyers? What is this? Anybody wants to jump in? And please, some different individuals. And I told you, nobody will tell you, will wrong you or anything if you say something different or like, out of the blue. I really appreciate, no matter what the response might be, right? There is no right or wrong. It's just, I want you to be practicing with these ideas. Jennifer, please.
It's like when buyers like play competitors against each other, so like they can force down prices.
Yeah, David, Jahid.
Maybe it's like using demand to kind of manipulate price up or down.
Yes, yes. And the case with GameStop, people did that, right? And also, how do you think how do you think Walmart becomes so cheap? Is it from the supplier side or the buyer side? Who wants to answer to that? I know, Jason, you have hand up.
Yeah, I was going to talk about elasticity, the price elasticity of demand. So basically, there's like substitution effect. So if you like, you can pit, I guess, two companies against one another by basically going for the one with the cheaper good by substituting it. So you can have obviously decide the price, the market price, depending on how elastic that is.
Right, right. Okay. How about, as I asked a question to you guys about Walmart, what kind of power does it have? Anybody wants to answer to that? I see Andrew and Jocelyn. Do you want to answer to this? Exactly. And you know what? The way they talk to their suppliers is really a hard conversation on the side of the supplier. It's not an easy interview. Whenever Walmart is considering buying from you, they actually mandate their own terms. And that's how they become the cheapest, because they say, hey, I'm going to buy this amount from you, but you have to be giving me with this price so that I become the cheapest or one of the cheapest offers out there. So is it a powerful or a weak buyer in this case? Walmart is a powerful or a weak one?
I would say that Walmart is a powerful buyer. It's kind of like in a way, it's kind of like a monopoly of wholesale. And they like have a huge market share when it comes to those products. So that's why it's so cheap.
Exactly. They are a very powerful buyer. So whenever, well, it's not only the Walmart, whenever you have a lot of options out there, guys, and I will talk about some industry life cycles with you too in the coming days. But whenever there are a lot of options out there, okay, when the customer is able to find cheaper options compared to yours, their power increases. So the buyer power increases not only related to the expectations of the customers, but also the availability of the options out there. Okay. Here, if there are low switching costs for the customer, which means with your product, the customer is easy to switch from one brand to another, then the bargaining power of the buyers is high. Okay. Backward integration, meaning that your buyer can actually acquire you as a supplier. Okay. So that means maybe Walmart, they have generic brands. They might have bought some of these suppliers themselves so that they sell through them. Okay. They produce it in-house and then they sell it too. So when the buyer becomes so powerful against whoever is selling, they may become even a buyer of the business originally. Okay. And again, your product quality, buyer's product quality is not affected by industry products. So it's actually The quality is similar most of the time. So as I said, they have so many options to choose from in the industry, and that's what gives them, their power. They can switch easily, they can find many options, and you're not differentiated enough, so they can make choices as much as they want. Okay. Suppliers, what are we talking about here? Suppliers can have bargaining power when, as Jocelyn just mentioned, there are more monopolies or oligopolies, right? Only a few firms dominate. Okay, sometimes it happens, unfortunately, in some industries, right? And then there is no competition from substitutes, so there is no substitute really. Uh, can you give examples of suppliers which are very powerful in some industries? Anything comes to mind? And those suppliers sell to several industries also. Okay, the same individuals. Okay, I'll ask then Kevin and Andrew then. Kevin and Andrew.
Yeah, so in the healthcare industry, since patents are used for medicines, you can only get it from one company if you have a disease or illness or condition. So they have a pretty big supplier advantage.
Bar, I'm sorry, and Andrew, there are some other people, so I want to give them more. Is it okay? Okay, thank you.
So
Okay,
the Boeing company for
yes,
airline industry
yes,
and
yes, yes, definitely. Yes, I was going to say that as well. The Boeing and Airbus, right? They actually already provide, and not everybody can produce these planes. It's not easy. And so the supplier usually dominates industry. The same thing happens in what kind of industries? What else? Okay, Jahid, Isaiah, go ahead.
So I actually have a question.
Yes.
You said suppliers have bargaining power when there is a monopoly or oligopoly?
No. Yes. So then there are few firms that are able to produce a product, and not many others can do it as themselves. That means, yeah, sometimes it does, because not everybody can do the same. That means it. That doesn't become a competitive field, does it?
Okay.
That's what we mean. And Isaiah?
I was gonna talk about the supplier. I think there's like one company that owns most of the diamond mines. So I think it's called De Beers. So I guess that's like an example.
Diamonds, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, De Beers is a good brand. Yeah, I know. And it's not easy, I think, to create diamonds and find them and then make them available for market and everything. Yeah. Christopher?
I was gonna talk about Coca-Cola and Pepsi, how they're like if you have my product in your store, you're not allowed to have the other competitor's product, and like they even do that on universities. Like my previous university, they only had Coca-Cola products because they had that restriction.
Yeah, it's the Pepsi and Coke war. That's a long time war between the two brands. Yes, but now since the generation has changed, Chris, uh, I don't think they have as much power as before. That's my view. I didn't look at the numbers, but the new generation seems to be going for smoothies. You're going for apple juice. Also, and also they have those varieties as well. I think Coca-Cola company has all these different beverage types, but still it was really fierce back in like maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But now we have new alternatives, and the new generation really are looking for some really organic beverages. But what we mean by suppliers having, bargain is usually when you have the power to raise prices as much as they want, and then also reduce the quality of the goods, because they are the only ones that produce a certain product which is in high demand. Okay. And the way they produce is the same thing with space industry. So space is something that I know Jeff Bezos is investing in, Elon Musk is investing in, Richard Branson is investing in, but I'm not seeing everybody is investing in space business because it's a very expensive area to invest. But I know once it becomes a demanded industry, real demands emerging, those will be maybe like having a good power, good considerable power compared to some others which might be emerging. But again, that's what we mean by supplier power. Your products should be very differentiated. They should have very high switching costs. Automobile industry had that years ago, decades ago, when Ford has produced this black car only. They had only black Fords available, and people were still buying it because that was the only car available. Okay, so Ford was producing it, and that's it. We're going to produce the black car, and that's it. That's a huge supplier power. You don't have to create additional varieties or anything. People just start looking for a car, and there's no one else doing it. Okay. And here we have something we call forward integration, which means the supplier becomes so strong that they might even buy their retailers, and they start to buy through their own, retail stores and everything, because they are both the producer and also the seller of the product. Okay, they could do that. Any questions?
Can you repeat what you said about forward integration?
Yeah, the supplier might become so strong that sometimes Apple does this. They have their own stores. They have their own Apple stores, for example. So they don't really use intermediaries to sell their products because they're already very strong. So they're able to sell. They don't need a third party. They don't need a distribution wholesaler, whatever, to distribute their products. They do it themselves. Okay.
So when they have more control over the distribution chain.
Yeah.
I see. Thank you.
Because they actually they could kind of push for their own terms all the time, their own prices, their own varieties of products. They can reduce the price if they want to. They can raise the price. That's why it's very dangerous to have like a few players in the industry sometimes. The risk of being monopoly, because it reduces the chance for competition and free trade, and people actually start to obey all of their rules because they don't have alternatives. Okay, so I'll stop here. We will talk about the substitutes and the others because we already talked about substitutes to a good deal today, actually. But I will talk more about them in our maybe next class. I don't want to really overwhelm you with all the discussion points. Now I'll create. Let me look at the chat first. Jahid, would you like me to address your question about Walmart? How do they price so low?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So how do they do it is mainly what I know from even with the history of Walmart, because in the past they weren't that powerful. But then they started to, because they expanded in rural areas first, where people were buying items regularly, especially like, for example, diapers, beer, these things that people buy. And usually they were looking at the buying habits of customers in those areas. And they were looking, when people had paychecks every month, they would go that weekend to buy in bulk. So they really had a wonderful way of analyzing the consumer behavior when they were doing this business in the beginning. So what happened is that they created all the strategy around these people who were living paycheck to paycheck and who were for whom the price was the main attractive criteria to buy from Walmart, because they were price sensitive individuals. Okay. So that's why Walmart always had a strategy of expanding in rural areas where people had limited income, they were working population, they didn't have alternative places to go because there was only like a limited space they would buy from. So what happened in time is, because they were able to read the consumer behavior so well, they became like highly demanded, marketplace. They were being like, desirable retail for people. So they started to work with their suppliers differently. So they said, hey, you might be having some power here. Of course, they didn't say it this way, but the way they made deals with their suppliers were very much on strict terms. So they had, they actually demanded really low price, lowest they could find in any place. So the supplier could only sell to Walmart, um, as long as they would be the lowest in any place, even in their own, selling place. If they sold some other place, Walmart would be the lowest. Otherwise, Walmart wouldn't buy from them. So Walmart has actually, mandated their terms on the suppliers really well. They made those negotiations so well. There's even stories about Walmart procurement department. They had